Frank Miller's hands shook as he pressed the revolver to his temple. Outside, the blizzard screamed. Inside, silence. His last 3 cattle were dying in the barn. The bank notice sat on the table stamped in red foreclosure. He'd prayed for months. Nothing came. His finger tightened on the trigger, then stopped. A knock. Faint. Impossible. No one came out here anymore. Another knock, stronger now. He lowered the gun and stumbled to the door, not knowing that the woman standing in that storm carried a secret that would either save his ranch or bury them both. Before we begin, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and stick with this story till the end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from, because I want to see how far this tale travels. Now let's get back to that frozen night in Wyoming. The gun clattered onto the table as Frank yanked open the door. Wind exploded into the cabin, hurling snow across the floorboards like a judgment. Through the white chaos stood a figure small and shaking, clutching a leather suitcase against her chest. "Please," she gasped. "I'm looking for Frank Miller." He stared. Her bonnet was frozen solid. Ice clung to her eyelashes. Blood had frozen on her split lip. "You found him," he said, voice rough as gravel. "What fool sent you out in this?" "No one sent me." She swayed, and he caught her elbow before she collapsed. "I came because you wrote a letter." Frank's stomach dropped. "The matrimonial agency." "Yes." Her teeth chattered so hard she could barely speak. "I'm Hope Abbott, your bride." He pulled her inside and slammed the door against the wind. "Ma'am, I never paid them. Never confirmed. That letter was just—" "I know." She sank into the chair by the dying fire, her whole body trembling. "They told me you didn't send payment, but I read what you wrote anyway." Frank turned away, shame burning through him. That letter. Written at midnight after burying his last hope of saving the ranch. He'd poured his soul into it, things he'd never said aloud. Then he'd hidden it in a drawer, too proud to mail it. "How'd you even get it?" he demanded. Hope fumbled with numb fingers to open her coat. She pulled out a crumpled envelope. "The agency owner's daughter found it in their rejection pile. She read it to me. Said she'd never seen a man write with such honesty about losing faith." "Had no business reading my private words." "Perhaps not." Hope met his eyes, and despite the cold, despite her exhaustion, her gaze was steady. "But she believed someone should answer you." Frank grabbed a blanket and threw it around her shoulders more roughly than he meant to. "You walked into a blizzard for a letter. I walked into a blizzard because I needed saving too, Mr. Miller. And sometimes 2 broken people can hold each other up better than 1 whole person ever could." Her words hit him like a fist to the chest. He turned to the fire and threw on the last of his good wood. Behind him, Hope coughed a wet, rattling sound that made his hand still. "When'd you last eat?" he asked. "Yesterday morning. The coach broke down 10 miles back. I walked the rest." "Christ almighty." He moved to the cupboard, pulling out the remains of a loaf of bread and some dried meat. It was meant to last him another 3 days. "Here." She took it with shaking hands but didn't eat. "You first. I ain't the one who nearly froze to death. And I'm not the one who looks like he hasn't slept in a week." She broke the bread in half and held out the larger piece. "We split it, or neither of us eats." Frank wanted to argue, but something in her tone, gentle but unyielding, reminded him of his mother. He took the bread and sat across from her. They ate in silence, the fire crackling between them. After a moment, Hope bowed her head. Frank watched as her lips moved in silent prayer. When she finished, she looked up and caught him staring. "Do you still pray, Mr. Miller?" The question was too direct, too raw. He looked away. "Used to. Don't see the point anymore." Because he didn't answer. Because he stopped listening. Frank stood abruptly, moving to the window. Snow pressed against the glass like a living thing. "I prayed when my folks died. Prayed when disease took my cattle. prayed when the bank sent their notice. Nothing changed. So either God's deaf or I ain't worth his time. Or, Hope said softly, he sent me. Frank's laugh was bitter. You think you're an answer to prayer? I think I'm here, and I think you're alive. She rose steady now, despite her exhaustion. That's 2 miracles you're too angry to see. Before he could respond, she moved past him to the small table where the gun still lay. She picked it up, checked the chamber, and methodically unloaded it. Then she walked to the door and hurled the bullets into the snow. What the hell are you doing? Frank shouted. Hope turned and her eyes were blazing. Saving your life, because whatever else happens tonight, you're going to live through it. You got no right. I have every right. Her voice cracked, and suddenly she wasn't calm anymore. She was shaking, and not from cold. You think you're the only one who wanted to quit. I left everything, Mr. Miller. My home, my reputation. I walked away from the only life I knew, because a man with power decided I was his property. He destroyed my father. He destroyed our name. And when I refused to marry him, he made sure the whole town knew I was ruined. Frank stared at her. So, yes. Hope continued, her voice dropping to something raw and fierce. I read your letter about losing faith, about being tired and alone, and I thought, here's a man who understands what it means to have nothing left. Maybe we could have nothing together. Maybe that would be enough. The cabin fell silent except for the howl of wind. Frank's throat worked, but no words came. Finally, he moved to the small cot by the hearth and pulled off the quilt. You take the bed, he said quietly. I'll sleep here. Mr. Miller, Frank, if we're gonna survive this storm together, you might as well call me Frank. Hope's expression softened. Then you should call me Hope. Don't seem fitting. Hope's the one thing I lost. Then maybe it's time you found it again. So, the storm raged for 3 days. On the first morning, Frank woke to the smell of coffee. Real coffee. He sat up disoriented and found Hope at the stove. Her hair braided back, sleeves rolled up. Where'd you find beans? He asked. Bottom of your cupboard. They're half moldy, but I picked out the good ones. She poured him a cup. I also found salt pork cornmeal and some dried apples. We won't starve. Frank took the coffee, too surprised to argue. It was weak, but hot, and the first taste made his eyes sting with something that wasn't just exhaustion. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. Hope sat across from him. I'm not a guest here, Frank. I'm your wife. At least I'm meant to be. We ain't married yet. No. But I came here for that purpose. And unless you're planning to send me back into the storm, we'd best start acting like partners. She said it so matter-of-factly, as if marriage was a business arrangement. Which Frank supposed it was. Still, something about her directness unsettled him. Partners, he repeated slowly. Yes. You need help with this ranch. I need a home. That's a fair trade, isn't it? Frank studied her over the rim of his cup. In the daylight, he could see her more clearly. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe late 20s. Her hands were soft but capable, and her eyes, blue as a summer sky, held a kind of quiet strength he hadn't seen in years. What makes you think you can help with a ranch? He asked. I grew up in Kansas City on the edge of farmland. My father was a teacher, but we kept chickens and a milk cow. I learned to tend animals before I learned to read. This ain't chickens and a cow, Hope. This is a dying operation. 3 cattle left and they're barely standing. I got no money for feed, no money for medicine. Hell, I can barely keep myself fed. Hope set down her cup. Show me. Show you what? The cattle. I want to see them. Frank wanted to refuse. Wanted to tell her it was too cold, too dangerous, too pointless. But something in her gaze challenged him. So he stood, pulled on his coat, and led her out into the snow. The barn was in worse shape than he remembered. The roof sagged under the weight of ice, and wind whistled through gaps in the walls. Inside, 3 cattle huddled together under moth-eaten blankets. One lay on its side, breath coming in short, painful gasps. Hope knelt beside the sick cow without hesitation. She laid a hand on its flank, feeling the fever radiating through the hide. "How long's she been like this?" Hope asked. 2 weeks, maybe more. "Have you tried warming her?" "Warming her." Frank's voice was sharp with frustration. "I got no medicine, no vet. I've done everything I can." Hope stood and moved to the hay pile. She dug through it, pulling out handfuls and sniffing them. Her face darkened. "This hay's moldy." "It's all I got." "It's killing them, Frank." She turned to him, and her expression was fierce. "Moldy hay causes fever. It gets into their lungs, their blood. You're poisoning them by trying to keep them alive." Frank felt the words like a blow. "I didn't know. I'm not blaming you. But we need to fix this now." Hope moved to the door. "Is there any clean hay anywhere on this property?" "Maybe a little in the loft. Wasn't enough to bother with." "Get it. I'll start clearing out this bad hay." For the next hour, they worked side by side. Hope threw out the contaminated feed, while Frank hauled down what little good hay remained. She moved with surprising strength, her small frame hiding a determination that matched his own. When the work was done, Hope mixed something in a bucket water salt and the dried apples she'd found in the cabin. She coaxed the sick cow to drink, whispering to it like a mother to a child. "Will that help?" Frank asked. "It'll ease the fever, but we need more than this. We need medicine and warmth." She looked up at him, cheeks flushed from exertion. "Can you patch that roof?" "With what I got, no lumber, no money to buy any." Hope was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Then we use what we have. There's old boards under the cabin, aren't there? I saw them when I came in." "Those are rotten." "Some of them, but not all. We take the good ones and patch the barn. It doesn't have to be pretty, it just has to keep the snow out." Frank stared at her. "You're serious?" "Deadly serious. These animals are your livelihood, Frank. They're all that stands between you and losing this place, so yes, we're going to save them." He wanted to tell her it was hopeless, wanted to explain that he'd tried everything and nothing worked. But the way she looked at him, steady, unflinching, believing, made the words die in his throat. "All right," he said finally. "We'll try." They spent the rest of the day scavenging boards and nails. Hope worked without complaint, even when her hands turned raw from the cold. By nightfall, they'd patched half the barn roof. It wasn't much, but it was something. That night, as they sat by the fire eating the last of the salt pork, Frank broke the silence. "Why'd you really come here, Hope?" She looked at him, surprised. "I told you, I needed—" "No, I mean, why me? You could have answered any letter. Why mine?" Hope was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because you weren't asking for a servant. Or a pretty face. You were asking for someone who understood what it meant to lose everything." She met his eyes. "And I do. I understand what it's like to pray and hear nothing back. To work until your hands bleed and still fail. To wonder if God even remembers your name." Frank's chest tightened. "The man who ruined me," Hope continued. "His name was Silas Kern. He owned half of Kansas City. Banks, railroads, land. When my father died and left debts, Silas came to me with an offer. Marry him, and the debts disappear. Refuse, and he'd take everything. What did you do?" "I refused. Then I watched him destroy my father's name, spread lies about me, turn the whole town against us. By the time he was done, I couldn't even buy bread without people spitting at me." Her voice cracked. "So I left, took what little I had and ran." "And came here." "And came here," she agreed. "Because at least with you I knew what I was walking into. Poverty, struggle, failure. But I also knew you wouldn't lie to me, wouldn't pretend things were better than they are, and that was worth more than any pretty promise." Frank reached across the table and took her hand. It was rough with new calluses, cold from the day's work. But it was real. "I can't promise things'll get better, Hope. Can't even promise we'll make it through winter. I know. But I can promise I'll fight. Long as you're here, I'll keep fighting." Hope's eyes glistened. "Then I'll fight too. And maybe that'll be enough." Outside, the storm began to quiet. The wind died to a whisper, and the first stars appeared through breaking clouds. Inside the cabin, two people who'd lost everything sat together in the firelight, holding on to the only thing they had left: each other. And in that moment, Frank Miller felt something he hadn't felt in months. Not happiness, not peace, but something close to it. Something that felt an awful lot like hope. The storm broke on the fourth day. Frank woke to sunlight streaming through the cabin windows, bright and brutal after days of gray. Hope was already up, sleeves rolled to her elbows, scrubbing the table with melted snow water. "We need supplies," she said without turning. "Salt, cornmeal, medicine for the cattle if we can afford it." Frank sat up, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Town's 8 miles. Roads'll be near impassable. Then we leave now before the snow melts and turns everything to mud." Hope hung the rag on a nail and faced him. "Unless you plan to hide out here until spring." "I ain't hiding." "Good. Then get dressed. We're going to Sweetwater." Frank wanted to argue, but the set of her jaw told him it was pointless. 20 minutes later, they were saddled up on his one remaining horse, Hope sitting behind him, with her arms wrapped around his waist for balance. The contact made him acutely aware of her presence, the warmth of her body against his back. "You ever ridden before?" he asked. "Once. I fell off." "That's comforting." "I didn't say I gave up." Her grip tightened as the horse picked its way through snowdrifts. "I got back on. Fell off twice more. Then I figured it out." Frank found himself almost smiling. "You always this stubborn." "You say stubborn. I say determined." Her breath was warm against his neck. "There's a difference." They rode in silence after that, the only sounds the crunch of snow and the horse's labored breathing. When Sweetwater finally came into view, Frank's stomach tightened. He hadn't been to town in 3 months, not since the bank notice arrived, and gossip spread like wildfire. The main street was half buried in snow. A few townspeople were out shoveling paths between buildings. As Frank dismounted and helped Hope down, heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. "Stay close," Frank muttered. "I'm not a child, Frank." "No, but you're new. And these folks got long memories and short patience." They pushed through the door of Callahan's General Store. The warmth inside was immediate and welcome. Mrs. Callahan stood behind the counter, her round face creasing into surprise when she saw them. "Frank Miller. Didn't expect to see you before spring thaw." "Needed supplies." Frank pulled off his hat. "This is Hope Abbott, my—" He hesitated, not sure what to call her. "His wife," Hope said firmly, extending her hand. "Or will be once we make it official." Mrs. Callahan's eyebrows shot up. "Wife, well, I'll be. Didn't know you were courting anyone, Frank." "Mail order," Frank said shortly. "From the Boston agency." The words hung in the air like smoke. Mrs. Callahan's expression shifted, something between pity and judgment flickering across her face. "I see. Well." She cleared her throat. "What can I get you?" Frank rattled off the list while Hope wandered the store, running her fingers over bolts of fabric and jars of preserves. When Mrs. Callahan began tallying the cost, Frank's heart sank. $12. He had 8. "Can you give me credit?" he asked quietly. "I'll pay you back when I sell cattle in spring." Mrs. Callahan's face hardened. "Frank, you still owe me $6 from last fall. I can't keep extending credit when—" "We'll take the cornmeal, salt, and coffee," Hope interrupted, appearing at Frank's elbow. "Hold the rest." Mrs. Callahan blinked. "That's barely enough to—" "It's enough." Hope counted out coins from a small purse Frank hadn't known she carried. "Thank you kindly, Mrs. Callahan." Outside, Frank rounded on her. "Where'd you get money?" "Saved it. From before." Hope handed him the parcel. "It wasn't much, but it's ours now." "Hope you can't just—" "Can't just what? Help my husband buy supplies." Her eyes flashed. "We're partners, Frank. That means what's mine is yours. Or did you forget already?" Before he could respond, a man's voice cut through the cold air. "Well, well, Frank Miller's back from the dead." Frank turned to see Deputy Tom Brennan leaning against a post, arms folded across his chest. Tom had been a friend once back before the ranch started failing. Now his smile was thin and mocking. "Tom," Frank said evenly. "Heard you took a mail-order bride. Didn't believe it." Tom's gaze slid to Hope, assessing. "Though I suppose beggars can't be choosers." Hope stepped forward before Frank could move. "And I suppose lawmen ought to remember their manners when addressing ladies. Or did your mother skip that lesson?" Tom's smile vanished. "You got a sharp tongue, miss." "Mrs. Miller," Hope corrected. "And yes, I do. My father taught me to speak truth even when it stings." A small crowd had gathered, drawn by the confrontation. Frank saw Mrs. Dodd from the boarding house, Old Man Harker from the livery, and several ranch hands he didn't recognize. All watching, all waiting to see him humiliated. "Hope," Frank said quietly. "Let's go." "Not yet." Hope turned to face the crowd, her voice carrying clear and strong. "I know what you're all thinking. That I'm desperate. That Frank's desperate. That we're two failures clinging to each other because no one else would have us." Frank's face burned. "Hope, stop. And you're right," Hope continued. "We are desperate. Frank's ranch is dying. I fled Kansas with nothing but the clothes on my back and shame following me like a shadow. But here's what you don't see." She stepped closer to Tom, her chin raised. "Desperate people fight harder. We got nothing left to lose, which means we got everything to fight for. So judge us all you want. It won't change what we're building." Silence fell over the street. Tom's face had gone red, but he said nothing. Finally, Old Man Harker spat into the snow and spoke. "She's got fire in her, Miller, more than you deserve." "I know it," Frank said quietly. Harker nodded slowly. "My mare's been lame since the storm. Can't afford the vet from Bozeman. Your woman really know anything about animals, or was that just talk?" Hope turned to him. "I know enough to try. No promises, but I'll look at her." "Fair enough. Livery's this way." The crowd parted as they followed Harker through the snow. Inside the livery, a chestnut mare stood in a stall, favoring her left front leg. Hope approached slowly, speaking soft words Frank couldn't quite hear. The horse's ears flicked toward her, wary, but not afraid. "Easy now," Hope murmured, running her hand down the horse's neck. "Let me see what's troubling you." She crouched and lifted the hoof carefully. Frank saw her face tighten. "Abscess," she said. "Deep one. Been draining." "Some," Harker admitted. "But it ain't healing right. Because you've been packing it with mud to keep dirt out. That's making it worse." Hope stood and looked around the livery. "You got any Epsom salts?" "Maybe. Why?" "Boil water and mix the salts in. Soak her hoof twice a day until the swelling goes down. Keep it wrapped in clean cloth between soakings. The heat will draw out the infection." Harker squinted at her. "That's it. That's it. Simple things work best." Hope patted the mare's shoulder. "She'll be sound in a week if you're faithful with it. And if I ain't, then she'll go lame permanent, and you'll be walking everywhere come spring." Hope's voice was matter-of-fact, not cruel, just honest. Harker grunted. "What do I owe you?" "Nothing. Just remember it when someone else needs help." The old man studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "You're all right, Mrs. Miller. Better than most folks gave you credit for." As they left the livery, Frank felt the weight of eyes on them, but the hostility had shifted into something else. Curiosity, maybe, or grudging respect. They were halfway to their horse when a woman's voice stopped them. "Excuse me, Mrs. Miller." Hope turned. A young woman stood in the doorway of the boarding house, a baby on her hip. Her face was drawn with exhaustion, dark circles under her eyes. "Yes." "I'm Sarah Brennan, Tom's wife." She glanced nervously down the street. "I heard what you did for Mr. Harker's mare. My baby, she's been sick for 2 weeks, coughing something terrible at night. Doctor says it's just winter cough, but—" Her voice broke. "I'm afraid it's getting worse." Hope moved toward her without hesitation. "May I see her?" Sarah led them inside to a small room upstairs. The baby, no more than 6 months old, lay in a cradle, her breathing quick and shallow. Hope knelt beside her, placing a hand on the tiny chest. "When did the cough start?" Hope asked. "Right after the storm hit. She was fine before that." Hope listened to the baby's breathing, then gently opened her mouth, checking her throat. Frank watched from the doorway, fascinated by the calm certainty in Hope's movements. "It's croup," Hope said finally. "Her airway's inflamed. That's why she sounds like she's struggling." Sarah's hands flew to her mouth. Will she? "She'll be fine if we act now." Hope stood. "Do you have a kettle?" "Yes, but—" "Boil water. Keep it boiling. The steam will open her airways and let her breathe easier. You'll need to stay with her through the night. Keep the room warm and humid. If her breathing gets worse or her lips turn blue, you send for me immediately." "But how will that—" "Trust me." Hope gripped Sarah's shoulders gently. "I've seen this before, steam and warmth. Your body knows how to heal itself if you give it the right conditions. God made us that way." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Thank you so much." "Don't thank me yet. Just do what I said, and we'll see her through this together." Outside, Frank helped Hope onto the horse, his mind racing. "Where'd you learn all that?" "I told you. I worked with a healer in Kansas." Hope settled behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist again. "But mostly I watched my mother. She died when I was 15, but before that, she was the one everyone came to when they were sick or hurt. Said God gave us 2 hands to help others, not just ourselves." "You miss her?" "Every day." Hope's voice was soft against his back. "She would have liked you, I think. You got the same stubborn streak she did." Frank urged the horse forward, and they rode in comfortable silence until the town disappeared behind them. When they were alone on the snowy trail, Hope spoke again. "They'll talk about us, you know, for weeks." "Let 'em. It doesn't bother you." Frank thought about the looks in town, the judgment, the whispers. He thought about Tom Brennan's mocking smile and Mrs. Callahan's pitying eyes. Then he thought about Hope, standing in that street, defending them both with fire in her voice. "Not anymore," he said. "Not when I got you beside me." Hope's arms tightened around him, and Frank felt something shift in his chest. Something dangerous and warm and entirely unexpected. They reached the ranch as sunset painted the snow orange and gold. The cattle were standing now, moving slowly but steadily around the barn. The sick cow had her head up, chewing hay with steady determination. "She's better," Hope breathed, sliding off the horse. She hurried to the barn, and Frank followed, watching as she checked each animal with gentle hands. "They're all better, Frank. Look at them." He looked. The fever-bright eyes were clear now. The labored breathing had eased. They weren't healthy yet, not by a long shot, but they were alive, fighting. "You did this," Frank said. "We did this." Hope turned to him, her face glowing in the fading light. "You got the clean hay. You patched the roof. I just helped them remember how to heal." Frank reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so natural he didn't think about it until after. Hope went still, her eyes searching his face. "Frank," she said quietly, We should talk about what happens next. Next. Marriage. Properly, I mean. With a preacher and witnesses. Her cheeks flushed. I know we haven't. That is, we've only known each other a few days. But if we're going to make this work, we need to do it right. Frank's hand dropped. You want to marry me. Legal and binding. I came here for that purpose. But now you've seen the ranch, seen how bad things are, seen the way folks look at me in town. Frank's voice roughened. You sure you want to tie yourself to this? Hope stepped closer, so close he could see the determination burning in her blue eyes. Frank Miller, I walked 10 miles through a blizzard to reach you. I threw your bullets in the snow. I scrubbed your floors and fixed your barn, and stood in front of the whole town defending your name. Do you really think I'd do all that just to run away now? People do. I don't. She placed her hand over his heart, and he felt its warmth through his shirt. I'm staying. The only question is whether you want me to. Frank covered her hand with his own, feeling his heart pound against their joined palms. He thought about all the reasons he should say no. His failure, his debts, his complete inability to promise her anything resembling security. But when he opened his mouth, what came out was, yes, I want you to stay. Hope's smile was like sunrise. Then we'll ride to Sweetwater Sunday and find the preacher. Make it official. Hope, I can't pay for a proper wedding, can't even buy you a ring. I don't need a ring. I need a partner. She squeezed his hand. That's worth more than gold anyway. They stood like that as darkness fell around them, two people who'd been strangers a week ago, now bound by something stronger than vows. Frank didn't know if it was love yet, but it was real. It was solid. And for the first time in months, it felt like enough. That night, as they ate the last of the cornmeal by firelight, Frank asked the question that had been nagging at him all day. This man in Kansas, Silas Kern, you think he'd come looking for you? Hope's spoon stilled. I don't know. But it's possible. Anything's possible. She set down the spoon, her appetite clearly gone. Silas is proud, cruel proud. I humiliated him by refusing his proposal. Men like him don't forget that. Then we need to be ready. Hope looked up sharply. Ready how? Frank stood and pulled something from behind the woodpile, his rifle cleaned and oiled. I ain't letting anyone take you, Hope. Not him. Not anyone. Frank, I mean it. He set the rifle by the door within easy reach. You're mine now, or will be come Sunday, and I protect what's mine. Hope rose and crossed to him, her hand finding his cheek. I'm not asking you to fight my battles. I know, but I'm offering anyway. Frank covered her hand with his. You saved my life, Hope. Way I see it, I owe you the same. She studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. All right, but Frank, if trouble comes, we face it together. No heroics, no sacrifices. We both walk away, or neither of us does. Deal. They shook on it like business partners, but when Hope's hand lingered in his, Frank felt the promise of something deeper. Something that scared him almost as much as it gave him hope. Later, as Hope settled into bed and Frank banked the fire, he heard her voice soft in the darkness. Frank, thank you. For what? For letting me stay. For believing I was worth keeping. Frank turned to look at her, this woman who'd appeared in a storm and changed everything. Hope, you're the only thing I got that's worth keeping. She didn't answer, but he heard her breath catch, and he knew she'd heard him. Outside, the temperature dropped, and snow began to fall again, light and quiet. But inside the cabin, warmth settled like a blessing. Frank lay awake long after Hope's breathing evened into sleep, thinking about Sunday, about vows and promises and the weight of forever. He'd stopped believing in miracles months ago. But lying there in the dark, listening to Hope's peaceful breathing, Frank Miller found himself wondering if maybe, just maybe, God hadn't given up on him after all. because if he had, he wouldn't have sent her, and that was miracle enough for any man. Sunday morning came cold and clear. Frank stood in front of the cracked mirror, trying to make his hair lie flat with water from the basin. His hands shook slightly as he buttoned his only good shirt, the one he'd worn to his parents' funeral 5 years back. "You're nervous," Hope said from behind him. He turned. She wore a simple blue dress, nothing fancy, but her hair was braided with care and her cheeks glowed pink. She looked young and scared and determined all at once. "Ain't every day a man gets married," Frank said. "No, it isn't." Hope smoothed her skirt, a nervous gesture he'd come to recognize. "Frank, if you've changed your mind." "I haven't." "Because we could wait. Give ourselves more time to—" Frank crossed the room and took her hands. "Hope Abbott, I ain't never been more sure of anything in my life. You understand me?" Her eyes searched his face. "Yes." "Then let's go get married." They rode double to Sweetwater Hope's arms wrapped tight around Frank's waist. The town was busier than before, families heading to church, children playing in the snow. When they dismounted outside the small chapel, Frank saw curtains twitch in nearby windows. Word had spread fast. Pastor Reynolds met them at the door, his weathered face breaking into a smile. "Frank Miller, heard you were coming today. And this must be the young lady who's got the whole town talking." "Hope Abbott," Hope said, extending her hand. "Thank you for agreeing to marry us on such short notice." "Short notice is often God's notice, my dear. Come in, come in." He ushered them inside, then paused. "You'll need witnesses, 2 at minimum for the register." Frank's stomach sank. He hadn't thought that far ahead. "I don't know who—" "I'll witness," came a voice from the back of the church. Frank turned to see Old Man Harker shuffling forward, his best coat buttoned tight. Behind him came Sarah Brennan holding her baby. "My mare's sound again, thanks to your wife," Harker said. "Figure I owe you both." Sarah nodded. "And my baby's breathing easy. Doctor came by yesterday, said whatever Mrs. Miller did worked better than anything he could have prescribed." Her voice dropped. "Tom wasn't happy about me coming, but I told him some debts got to be paid." Frank felt his throat tighten. "You didn't have to." "Yes, we did," Harker interrupted. "Now, let's get this done before folks start gossiping about why we're all standing in the cold." The ceremony was short and simple. Pastor Reynolds read from Corinthians about love bearing all things and believing all things. Frank repeated the vows, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. When it came time for Hope to speak, she looked directly into his eyes. "I, Hope Abbott, take you, Franklin Miller, to be my husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death parts us." The weight of those words settled over Frank like a mantle. Death parts us. He thought about the gun she'd unloaded the bullets thrown into snow. She'd saved his life once already. Now she was binding herself to it. "You may kiss your bride," Pastor Reynolds said with a gentle smile. Frank had kissed women before, quick stolen moments in his youth. But when he leaned in and pressed his lips to Hope's, it felt like sealing a covenant. She tasted like coffee and snow and promise. Her hand came up to rest against his cheek, and for a moment the church disappeared, and there was only her. When they broke apart, Sarah was crying softly. Harker cleared his throat and looked away. "Well then," Pastor Reynolds said, clearly moved. "May God bless this union and grant you both the strength to weather whatever storms may come." They signed the register with trembling hands. As they stepped outside, Frank saw a small crowd had gathered. Mrs. Callahan from the general store, the livery workers, several ranch families he recognized, and standing at the back, arms folded across his chest, Deputy Tom Brennan. "Congratulations, Miller," someone called out. "About time you found someone to set you straight," another voice added, followed by scattered laughter. Hope's hand found Frank's, squeezing tight. He squeezed back, and together they walked through the crowd toward their horse. They were almost there when Tom stepped forward, blocking their path. Got a word for you, Miller. Private. Frank felt Hope stiffen beside him. Anything you got to say you can say in front of my wife. Tom's jaw worked. Fine. Got a telegram at the office yesterday, from Kansas City. Man asking about a woman matching Hope's description. Said she stole from him, and he aims to bring her back for trial. The crowd went silent. Frank felt ice slide down his spine. That's a lie. Hope said, her voice clear and strong. I never stole anything. Man claims you took $500 from his safe before you ran. Tom's eyes were cold. That's a serious charge, Mrs. Miller. Who sent the telegram? Frank demanded. Man named Silas Kern. Says he's a prominent businessman, bank owner, respected citizen. Hope's face went white. He's a liar and a tyrant. He tried to force me into marriage, and when I refused, he destroyed my father's reputation. This is just another way to control me. That your story? Tom asked. That's the truth, Hope shot back. But I don't expect you to believe me. Men like Silas always sound reasonable when they're hunting someone weaker. Tom shifted uncomfortably. Frank could see the crowd watching, waiting to see which way the deputy would fall. Look, Tom said finally, I got no jurisdiction over Kansas City matters, but if he sends a marshal or bounty hunter, I can't stop them from taking you back. Over my dead body, Frank said quietly. Tom's eyes snapped to his. Don't do something stupid, Miller. I'm warning you as a friend. You stopped being my friend when you chose their side, Frank said, gesturing to the crowd. When my ranch started failing and you laughed with the rest of them, so don't pretend you're doing me favors now. Tom's face flushed red. I was trying to save it. Frank helped Hope onto the horse, then mounted behind her. We're going home. Anyone tries to stop us, they'll answer to me. They rode out of Sweetwater in tense silence, the crowd parting before them. When the town disappeared behind them, Hope finally spoke. He'll come for me. You know that, don't you? Let him try. Frank, you don't understand what kind of man Silas is. He owns judges. He owns lawmen. He'll make this legal somehow, and then we fight it legal too. Frank's arm tightened around her waist. We get a lawyer. We tell your side. We make sure everyone knows what he did. With what money? We can barely afford cornmeal. Frank didn't have an answer for that. They rode the rest of the way in silence, both lost in their own dark thoughts. Back at the ranch, Frank unsaddled the horse while Hope went inside. When he followed her in, he found her sitting at the table, head in her hands. I should leave, she said without looking up. Before he comes. Before he hurts you too. Frank knelt beside her chair. Hope, look at me. She raised her head, and he saw tears tracking down her cheeks. You're my wife now, Frank said. Legal and binding. That means when trouble comes, we face it together. Remember. But. No buts. We made vows today, in sickness and health, better or worse. Well, this is worse, so we deal with it. Hope's hand found his cheek. You're a good man, Frank Miller. Better than I deserve. That's a damn lie, and you know it. He stood, pulling her to her feet. Now come on. We got cattle to feed and a barn roof that needs finishing. Work helps when worry doesn't. They spent the afternoon in hard labor. Frank patching the last holes in the barn, while Hope mixed her healing tonics for the cattle. The rhythm of work steadied them both, gave them something to focus on, besides the threat hanging over their heads. As sunset painted the snow orange, a rider appeared on the horizon. Frank's hand went instinctively to his rifle, but Hope touched his arm. Wait! That's Sarah Brennan. Sarah dismounted quickly, her face flushed with urgency. Mrs. Miller, thank God you're here. It's the Henderson's boy. Fell through the ice on Miller Creek. They pulled him out, but he's not breathing right. Doctor's in Bozeman for the week and... She broke off, breathless. Please, they're desperate. Hope didn't hesitate. Frank, saddle the horses. Sarah, tell me everything you know about his condition. As Sarah rattled off details, Frank readied their mounts. Part of him wanted to refuse to keep Hope here where she was safe. But he saw the determination in her eyes and knew arguing was pointless. The Henderson place was 3 miles east, a small homestead struggling just like Frank's. When they arrived, they found a crowd gathered outside, faces grim. Mrs. Henderson met them at the door, her eyes wild with fear. "He's in here. Please. I don't know what else to do." The boy lay on a bed, his lips tinged blue, his breathing shallow and wet. He couldn't have been more than 10. Hope moved to his side, immediately pressing her ear to his chest. "How long was he under?" she asked. "Maybe 2 minutes," Mrs. Henderson sobbed. "Maybe more. I don't know. It felt like forever." Hope's hands moved quickly, checking the boy's pulse, his temperature, his color. "His lungs are full of water. We need to get it out." "How?" Mr. Henderson demanded. "The doctor's not here and—" "Turn him on his side. Now!" Hope's voice carried absolute authority. They obeyed, and Hope pressed down hard on the boy's back, just below his ribs. Water gushed from his mouth, clear and cold. The boy coughed violently, his whole body convulsing. "Keep him on his side," Hope ordered. "Don't let him roll back." She worked for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes pressing and releasing coaxing water from the boy's lungs. Finally, his coughing eased and his breathing steadied. Color began returning to his lips. "He'll live," Hope said, sitting back on her heels. "But you need to keep him warm. Watch for fever. If his breathing changes or he starts coughing blood, send for me immediately." Mrs. Henderson collapsed beside her son, sobbing with relief. Mr. Henderson gripped Hope's hand hard enough to hurt. "We got nothing to pay you with," he said roughly. "But whatever you need whenever you need it, you call on us. You hear me?" Hope nodded, too exhausted to speak. Frank helped her to her feet and led her outside where the crowd had grown. News had spread fast, as it always did in small communities. "She saved him," someone whispered. "Pulled him back from death itself," another voice added. As they rode home, Frank felt the weight of what had just happened settling over them. Hope had saved a child's life with nothing but knowledge and courage. Word would spread even faster now, and with it, more attention. "You did good today," Frank said quietly. Hope leaned back against him, bone-tired. "I just did what needed doing." "It's more than that. You got a gift, Hope. A real one." "Gifts come with prices," she said. "The more people who know what I can do, the more visible I become. And the easier it'll be for Silas to find me." Frank had no answer for that, because he knew she was right. They reached the ranch as full dark fell. Frank helped Hope inside and settled her by the fire while he heated water for coffee. She was asleep before it finished boiling. Her head pillowed on her arms at the table. He watched her sleep, this woman who'd become his wife just that morning, and felt something fierce and protective rise in his chest. Let Silas Kern come. Let whoever he sent come. Frank Miller might be a failed rancher with a dying spread, but he'd defend what was his with every breath in his body. He was banking the fire when he heard hoofbeats outside. Fast and urgent. Frank grabbed his rifle and moved to the window. 2 riders approached through the moonlight, moving with purpose. He stepped outside, rifle raised. "That's far enough. State your business." The riders stopped. One dismounted slowly, hands visible. As he stepped into the light from the cabin window, Frank recognized him. Marshal Thomas Wade from Bozeman, a hard man with a reputation for being fair but unbending. "Frank Miller?" Wade asked. "That's right." "I'm looking for a woman named Hope Abbott. Got a warrant for her arrest out of Kansas City. Information says she might be here." Frank's blood turned to ice. "She's my wife. Married her this morning, legal and proper." "That may be, but she's still wanted for theft. $500 from a safe belonging to Silas Kern." Wade pulled out a folded paper. "I gotta bring her in, Miller. That's the law." The law, Frank said carefully, is being used by a powerful man to punish a woman who wouldn't submit to him. That's for a judge to decide, not me, not you. Wade's voice was sympathetic but firm. Make this easy, Miller. Don't make me come back with more men. And if I refuse, then I arrest you both. Is that what you want? The cabin door opened. Hope stepped out wrapped in Frank's coat, her face pale but composed. I'll go, she said quietly. Hope, no. I'll go, she repeated louder now. But Marshal, I want to state for the record that these charges are false. Silas Kern is a corrupt man who's using the law to silence me because I wouldn't marry him. Wade nodded slowly. You'll have your chance to tell your side in court, ma'am. That's all I can promise. That's not good enough, Frank said, stepping between them. You take her, you're sentencing her to whatever Kern's got planned. He owns judges in Kansas City. She'll never get a fair trial. Maybe not, but that's how the system works. Wade's hand moved toward his gun. Step aside, Miller. Don't make this worse. Frank's mind raced. He could shoot Wade, but the other rider would flee and bring back a dozen men. He could run with Hope, but they wouldn't make it far in winter with no supplies. Every option led to disaster. How much time do we have? Hope asked suddenly. Wade blinked. Ma'am, before you take me back, how much time? I was planning to head out at first light. That gives you tonight to settle your affairs. Then I request one thing. There's a boy at the Henderson place who nearly drowned today. I need to check on him in the morning, make sure he's healing properly. If I don't, he could die. Wade studied her for a long moment. You the one they're calling the healing woman? The one who saved Harker's mare and the Brennan baby? I don't know what they're calling me, but yes, I helped those folks. The marshal exchanged glances with his companion. Finally he sighed. I'll give you until noon tomorrow. You check on the boy, say your goodbyes. But at noon, we leave for Kansas City. You try to run, I'll hunt you down and add escape charges to the warrant. Understood? Understood, Hope said. Wade and his companion rode off into the darkness. The moment they disappeared, Frank rounded on Hope. What the hell were you thinking? We should have fought them. We should have... Should have what? Gotten yourself killed. Arrested. Hope's voice was sharp. Frank, I won't let you throw your life away for me. You're my wife, and you're all I have. She grabbed his shirt, her eyes blazing. If you fight the law, you lose everything. The ranch, your freedom, maybe your life. I won't be responsible for that. So you just give up? Just let him win? I'm buying us time. Hope's voice dropped. Noon tomorrow. That gives us tonight and half a day. Maybe that's enough. Enough for what? To find proof. To find something that shows what Silas really is. Her hands fisted in his shirt. Frank, I didn't steal that money. But someone did. And if Silas is accusing me, it's because he needs a scapegoat for something worse. Frank stared at her, his mind spinning. You think he embezzled from his own safe? I think Silas Kern is capable of anything if it serves his purposes. And I think if we can prove it, we can stop this before it starts. How? We got no resources, no connections in Kansas City, and less than 24 hours. Hope's jaw set in that stubborn line he'd come to recognize. Then we'd better get started. They worked through the night by lamplight, Hope writing down everything she remembered about Silas, his business dealings, the people he'd wronged. Frank read each page, his anger growing with every detail. He's a monster, Frank said finally. Yes, but he's a careful monster. Everything he does through intermediaries, through lawyers and contracts and legal maneuvering. That's what makes him so dangerous. Then how do we fight him? Hope looked up, exhaustion etched in her face. I don't know, but we have until noon to figure it out. As dawn broke, they rode together to the Henderson place. The boy was sitting up in bed, color returned to his cheeks, eating porridge his mother had made. Mrs. Miller, he called out when he saw her. Ma said you saved my life. Hope smiled and checked his breathing, his pulse. You saved your own life by being strong. I just helped a little. When I grow up, I'm gonna be a doctor like you, the boy declared. Gonna help people just like you did. Mrs. Henderson pressed a small cloth bundle into Hope's hands. It ain't much, just some bread and preserves, but it's all we got. You don't have to. Yes, we do. Mrs. Henderson's eyes were fierce. You gave us our son back. That's worth everything we own and more. As they prepared to leave, Mr. Henderson pulled Frank aside. Heard the marshal came by your place last night. Heard he's taking your wife away. News travels fast. It does, and so do favors. Henderson's voice dropped. You need help, Miller. You just say the word. Every man in this valley owes Hope Miller a debt. We don't forget that. Frank gripped his hand. I'll remember. They rode back slowly, the sun climbing higher with each passing minute. At 11:30, Marshal Wade appeared on the horizon, right on schedule. Frank helped Hope down from the horse, his hands lingering on her waist. We can still run. No, we can't. Hope. She silenced him with a kiss, fierce and desperate. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet. Listen to me. You fight for this ranch. You make it work. You prove that what we started here matters. And when I come back, if you come back, when I come back, she repeated firmly, I want to come home to a man who kept his faith. Can you do that for me? Frank couldn't speak around the lump in his throat. He just nodded. Wade dismounted as he approached. Time's up, Mrs. Miller. We need to go. Hope straightened her shoulders and turned to face him. I'm ready. Hope Miller, a voice shouted from the direction of town. They all turned. A wagon was racing toward them, driven by Old Man Harker, with Pastor Reynolds beside him. Behind them came more wagons, more riders. The whole town, it seemed, descending on the Miller ranch. Wade's hand went to his gun. What's this about? Harker pulled the wagon to a stop, breathing hard. Marshal, before you take this woman, you ought to hear what we got to say. This ain't a town meeting, old man. I got a warrant, and I aim to execute it. Then execute it after you hear us out. Pastor Reynolds climbed down from the wagon, his face grave. Because what we have to say might change your mind about Mrs. Miller's character. Wade looked uncertain for the first time. I don't see how. She saved my daughter's life, Sarah Brennan said, stepping forward with her baby. When the doctor said it was just a cough, she knew better. If she hadn't helped us, my baby would be dead. She fixed my mare when no one else could, Harker added. Didn't ask for payment. Didn't ask for thanks. Just helped because it needed doing. One by one, people stepped forward. The Hendersons, Mrs. Callahan, ranch families Frank barely knew, each one testifying to Hope's character, her kindness, her skill. Wade listened, his expression unreadable. When the last person finished, he turned to Hope. These folks seem mighty fond of you, Mrs. Miller. They're good people, Hope said quietly. Better than I deserve. Maybe, maybe not. Wade pulled out the warrant again, studying it. Tell me something. This Silas Kern, he a fair man? No, sir. He's cruel and corrupt and used to getting his way. And you refused to marry him? I did. Wade was quiet for a long moment. Then he folded the warrant and put it back in his pocket. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm riding back to Bozeman and wiring Kansas City. Gonna ask some questions about Mr. Kern and his business practices. Gonna see if this warrant is as clean as it looks. Frank's heart leaped. You mean? I'm giving you time. Maybe a week, maybe two. But if my questions come back with nothing, or if you try to run, I'm coming back with a federal marshal and a full warrant. We clear? Crystal clear, Hope breathed. And Mrs. Miller? Wade's voice softened slightly. You keep helping these folks, because if I do have to arrest you, they're going to be your best defense. He mounted his horse and rode off, his companion following. The moment they disappeared, the crowd erupted in cheers. People surrounded Hope, shaking her hand, thanking her promising support. Frank stood back watching his wife. His wife handled the attention with grace and humility. When she finally broke free and came to him, her smile was like sunrise. "We bought time," she said. "We did. Now we figure out how to use it." She took his hand, and together they faced the crowd. Their neighbors, their community, people who'd judged them a week ago and now stood ready to defend them. "Thank you," Hope called out. "All of you, for believing in us when you had no reason to." "You gave us reason, Mrs. Miller," Pastor Reynolds said. "Now let's see what we can do to help you keep your freedom." As the crowd dispersed making plans and promises, Frank pulled Hope close. They'd bought time, yes. But time was running out like sand through an hourglass. And somewhere in Kansas City, Silas Kern was planning his next move. The week that followed felt like living on borrowed time. Frank woke each morning expecting to see Marshal Wade riding back with federal men, but each dawn broke quiet and cold. Hope threw herself into work tending cattle, helping neighbors, as if she could outrun the threat by staying in motion. On the third day, Pastor Reynolds arrived with news. "Sent a telegram to a friend of mine in Kansas City, minister named Dobbs, asked him to look into Silas Kern's reputation." "And," Frank asked, "Dobbs says Kern's got his fingers in everything, banks, railroad, city contracts. But here's the strange part." Reynolds pulled out a telegram. 3 months before Hope left Kansas City, Kern's bank reported a shortage, $800 missing from the main vault. No arrests were made, no investigation happened. It just disappeared from the public record. Hope's face went pale. 800. He claimed I stole 500. "Which means someone else took 300 before you even left," Frank said slowly. "Or the whole damn thing is a lie." "That's what I'm thinking," Reynolds said. "But proving it from here is near impossible. We'd need someone in Kansas City willing to dig through bank records and city documents. Someone Kern doesn't own." "We don't have anyone like that," Hope said quietly. "Maybe we do." Reynolds hesitated. Dobbs mentioned something else. Said there's a woman named Clara Hendricks who runs a boarding house near Kern's bank. Her husband was one of Kern's clerks. Died under suspicious circumstances 2 years back. Dobbs thinks she might talk if approached right. Frank stood abruptly. "Then I'm going to Kansas City." "Frank, no," Hope started. "Yes. Someone's got to go, and it can't be you. Wade's watching for you to run." Frank grabbed his coat. "I'll take the train talk to this Clara woman, see what I can find." "With what money?" Hope demanded. "Train fare alone would cost everything we have." "Then I'll find another way." "Frank Miller, you're not thinking straight." Hope's voice rose. "Even if you get there, Kern has eyes everywhere. The moment you start asking questions about him, he'll know. And then what? He'll have you arrested too, or worse. So what do you suggest? We just wait for Wade to come back with nothing and watch them drag you away?" "I suggest we think." Hope slammed her hand on the table. "Rushing in blind gets us both killed or imprisoned. We need a real plan." Before Frank could respond, hoofbeats sounded outside. They exchanged worried glances, but it was only Tom Brennan dismounting quickly. "Got something you need to see," Tom said, stepping inside without invitation. His face was grim. "Came in this morning's post, addressed to Hope Miller, care of the Sweetwater General Store." He handed over an envelope. The handwriting was elegant feminine. Hope opened it with shaking hands and read aloud. "Mrs. Miller, you don't know me, but I know what Silas Kern did to you and your father. My name is Clara Hendricks. My late husband worked for Kern and discovered evidence of embezzlement. Before he could report it, he died in a fire that was ruled accidental. I have papers he hid. Papers that prove Kern has been stealing from his own bank for years. If you want justice, meet me in Cheyenne on December 15th. The Grand Hotel. Come alone. Clara." Silence filled the cabin. "It's a trap," Tom said flatly. "Has to be. Kern sends this woman you show up. He grabs you legal and proper on Kansas soil. Cheyenne's not Kansas, Hope said. Close enough. And convenient enough for Kern to have people watching. Tom shook his head. Don't go. It's suicide. Frank took the letter, studying the handwriting. What if it's real? What if this Clara woman actually has proof? Then why reach out now? Tom demanded. Why not go to authorities herself? Because she's scared, Hope said quietly. Because Kern killed her husband, and she knows going to the law means going to men Kern owns. She looked up, her eyes fierce. This might be our only chance. It might be a noose, Frank countered. Tom's right. It's too convenient. Or it's God answering prayer, Hope said. We asked for a way to fight back. Maybe this is it. And maybe it's Kern being clever. Frank paced the small cabin. He knows we're desperate, knows we'd jump at anything that looks like hope. Then we verify it first, Hope said. Pastor Reynolds said his friend Dobbs knows Clara Hendricks. We wire him, ask if she's real, if her husband really died in a fire. If the details match, we know it's legitimate. Tom shifted uncomfortably. And if it does match, then I go to Cheyenne, Hope said. Absolutely not, Frank snapped. You're not walking into, we go. Hope interrupted, looking directly at him. Together, not alone like she asked, but together. If it's a trap, we face it together. If it's real, we get the proof together. Frank wanted to argue, but the determination in her eyes stopped him. He looked at Tom. You think Wade would let us leave town? Wade's not watching you. He's waiting for answers from Kansas City. Far as he knows, you're both sitting tight. Tom rubbed his jaw. But if you go and something happens, I can't help you. My jurisdiction ends at the county line. Understood, Frank said. One more thing. Tom pulled another paper from his coat. This came with the letter. Fell out of the envelope. It was a bank receipt dated 3 months before Hope left Kansas City. $800 withdrawn from Silas Kern's personal account, signed by Kern himself. He withdrew the money himself, Hope breathed, then claimed it was stolen. That's what it looks like, Tom agreed. But one receipt ain't enough. Any lawyer could explain it away. You need more. Then we get more, Frank said. We go to Cheyenne, we meet this Clara woman, and we get everything she has. After Tom left, Frank and Hope sat together by the fire, the weight of the decision pressing down on them. We're walking into danger, Frank said finally. We've been in danger since the day I arrived. Hope leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. At least this time we're moving toward something instead of just waiting. You scared? Terrified. Her hand found his. But I'm more scared of doing nothing. Of letting Kern win because we were too afraid to fight. Frank kissed the top of her head. Then we fight, but we do it smart. We bring my rifle. We stay in public places. And the first sign of trouble we run. Deal. They spent the next 2 days preparing. Pastor Reynolds wired his friend Dobbs, who confirmed Clara Hendricks was real. Her husband had died in a fire, and she'd been asking quiet questions about Kern for months. Frank sold 2 of their remaining cattle to buy train tickets and a little traveling money. The sacrifice hurt, but it was necessary. The night before they left, Sarah Brennan came by with a package. Heard you're heading out, wanted to give you this. Inside was a small pistol, the kind women carried in their bags. It was my mother's, Sarah said. Tom doesn't know I still have it, so keep that quiet. But I figure if you're walking into danger, you ought to be armed. Hope took it carefully. Sarah, I can't. Yes, you can. You saved my baby's life. This is me saving yours if it comes to that. Sarah's eyes were fierce. Just promise me you'll come back. Both of you. We promise, Hope said. The train to Cheyenne left at dawn. Frank and Hope boarded with their small bags, finding seats near the back where they could watch other passengers. The car was half empty, mostly ranch families and traveling salesmen. 3 hours into the journey, Hope stiffened. Frank, 2 rows up, the man in the brown coat. Frank glanced over casually. The man was reading a newspaper, but something about him felt wrong. Too still, too aware. You know him, Frank murmured. No. But I've seen men like him before, in Kansas City. The kind Kern hired to watch people. Frank's hand moved to his rifle hidden under the seat. What do we do? Nothing yet. Just watch. Hope opened her own bag, checking the pistol Sarah had given her. If he makes a move, we're ready. They rode in tense silence for another hour. The man never looked at them directly, but Frank felt eyes on them the whole time. When the train stopped at a small depot for water, the man got off and disappeared into the crowd. Is he gone? Hope asked. Maybe. Or maybe he's wiring ahead to tell someone we're coming. Frank stood. We should get off here, change our route. And go where we're still 50 miles from Cheyenne. We'd have to hire horses, find our own way through country we don't know. Hope shook her head. We keep going, but we stay alert. When the train started moving again, a new passenger boarded their car. An older woman with gray hair and a kind face. She sat across from them and smiled. Heading to Cheyenne? She asked pleasantly. Yes, ma'am, Hope replied carefully. Visiting family or business? A bit of both. Frank said, unwilling to give details. The woman nodded, pulling out knitting needles. It's a fine city. I've lived there 20 years. If you need recommendations for lodging or dining, I'm happy to help. That's kind of you, Hope said, relaxing slightly. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the woman's needles clicking rhythmically. Then she spoke again, her voice lower. The man in the brown coat. He works for the Railroad Detective Agency. I've seen him before on this route. He watches people, reports back to whoever's paying him. Frank and Hope exchanged glances. The woman's eyes remained on her knitting. If I were you, she continued quietly, I'd get off at the Cheyenne Depot and go straight to the Grand Hotel. Don't linger. Don't window shop. Don't give anyone time to follow you properly. And once you're inside, stay there until your business is concluded. Why are you helping us? Hope asked. The woman looked up, then her eyes sharp and knowing. Because 20 years ago, a man like Silas Kern destroyed my first husband, took everything we had and left us with nothing. I survived, but barely. And I learned something important. Her needles never stopped moving. Powerful men only stay powerful because good people stay quiet. So when I see someone brave enough to make noise, I help however I can. You know about Kern, Frank said carefully. Everyone in Kansas City knows about Kern. They just don't say it out loud. She smiled grimly. Be careful, young people. Men like him don't fight fair. Neither do we, Hope said. The woman's smile widened. Good. Cheyenne appeared through the train windows as afternoon sun slanted across the plains. Frank helped Hope gather their things. His nerves stretched tight. The platform was crowded with people wagons' noise. Stay close, Frank murmured. They moved quickly through the crowd. Frank's hand on Hope's elbow. The Grand Hotel stood 3 blocks from the depot, a solid brick building with polished windows. They pushed through the doors into warmth and light. The clerk at the desk looked up. Help you folks. We're meeting someone, Hope said. A Mrs. Clara Hendricks. Is she registered here? The clerk checked his ledger. Room 207. Checked in yesterday. Shall I send word you're here? Please. They waited in the lobby, Frank's rifle close at hand. Other guests came and went, but no one paid them particular attention. After 15 minutes, a woman descended the stairs. She was perhaps 40, dressed in modest black, her face lined with grief and determination. Her eyes found Hope immediately. Mrs. Miller? Yes, and this is my husband, Frank. Clara looked at Frank, surprise flickering across her face. Your letter said, come alone. Plans change, Hope said firmly. Whatever you have to show me, Frank needs to see too. We're partners in this." Clara hesitated, then nodded. "Upstairs, room 207, quickly." They followed her up to a small but clean room. Clara locked the door behind them and pulled the curtains closed. From under the bed, she dragged a small trunk. "My husband Samuel was Silas Kern's chief clerk for 10 years. He kept the books, managed accounts, handled deposits." Clara's hands shook as she opened the trunk. 3 years ago, he noticed discrepancies. Small ones at first, $100 here, $50 there. Always explained away as clerical errors or legitimate expenses. "But they weren't," Hope said. "No. Sam started keeping his own records, secret ones. He documented every suspicious transaction, every missing deposit, every false entry." Clara pulled out a thick leather folder. "This is 2 years of evidence. Kern was stealing from depositors, from business partners, from anyone who trusted him with money." Frank took the folder, flipping through pages of meticulous notes, receipts, bank statements. "This is enough to put him away for decades." "It should have been. But before Sam could take it to authorities, our house caught fire. Sam went back in to save these papers. He got them out, but died from smoke." Clara's voice broke. "The fire marshal ruled it accidental. A knocked-over lamp, they said. But I know better. Sam told me the day before that he'd been followed, that someone had searched his office at the bank. He knew Kern suspected something." "Why didn't you go to the law after he died?" Hope asked gently. "With what proof? These papers prove financial crimes, not murder. And Kern owns half the judges in Kansas City. I'd be dead within a week." Clara wiped her eyes. "But when I heard he was coming after you with false charges, I knew I had to do something. You're the first person who's had the courage to stand up to him publicly. If we combine your testimony with Sam's evidence, we might actually have a chance. Or we might both end up dead," Frank said bluntly. "That's a risk I'm willing to take." Clara's jaw set. "I've been living in fear for 2 years. I'm tired of it. And I'm tired of watching Kern destroy good people while everyone looks away." A loud knock at the door made them all jump. "Mrs. Hendricks, this is hotel security. We need to speak with you." Clara's face went white. "How did they know?" "The clerk must have tipped someone off," Frank said, moving to the window. The street below was suddenly busy with men, too many to be coincidence. "We're surrounded. Mrs. Hendricks, open this door or we're coming in," the voice demanded. Hope grabbed the leather folder. "Is there another way out?" "Fire escape. Back window." Clara was already moving. "But it leads to an alley. If they're smart, they'll have men there too." "Then we don't go down," Frank said. "We go up. To the roof." They climbed out the window as the door began to splinter behind them. The metal fire escape was icy treacherous. Frank went first, rifle slung over his back, then helped Hope and Clara up. Behind them they heard shouting as men burst into the room. "There, on the fire escape." "Move," Frank urged. They scrambled upward, hands numb with cold feet slipping on ice. A gunshot cracked the air and metal sparked near Frank's head. "They're shooting!" Clara gasped. "Keep climbing!" Hope shouted back. They hauled themselves onto the roof, flat tar and gravel, nowhere to hide. Frank scanned desperately for options. The next building was 6 feet away across an alley, far enough to kill them if they missed. "We jump," he said. "Are you insane?" Clara demanded. "You got a better idea." Another gunshot closer this time. "Because they're coming up fast and we're out of options." Hope looked at the gap, then at Frank. "Together, together." He took her hand and they ran. For one terrifying moment, Frank felt nothing but air beneath his boots. Then they hit the next roof hard, rolling across gravel. Clara jumped a second later, Frank catching her before she tumbled over the far edge. "This way." Hope pointed to a door leading down into the building. They crashed through, finding themselves in a narrow stairwell. Down they went 3 flights, then out into an alley. The street was chaos, people running, shouting. In the confusion, they slipped into a crowd and kept moving, not stopping until they'd put 6 blocks between them and the hotel. Finally, Hope pulled them into a closed shop's doorway, all three gasping for breath. "Did we lose them?" Clara panted. "For now," Frank said. "But they'll be looking. We can't stay in Cheyenne. We can't leave without delivering this evidence to someone who matters." Hope countered, clutching the leather folder. "Otherwise Sam died for nothing, and we risked everything for nothing." "There's a federal marshal's office 2 blocks from the train depot," Clara said. "Marshal named Coleman. He's not from Kansas City. Kern doesn't own him." "You sure about that?" Frank demanded. "As sure as I can be about anything." Clara's eyes were fierce. "It's our only shot." They moved through back streets, avoiding main thoroughfares. The marshal's office sat between a feed store and a telegraph office, a small brick building with barred windows. Frank pushed through the door, first rifle ready. A man looked up from behind a desk, his hand dropping to his gun. "Easy there, cowboy. State your business." "Are you Marshal Coleman?" Hope asked, stepping forward. "Depends who's asking." "My name is Hope Miller. This is my husband Frank and Clara Hendricks. We have evidence of criminal fraud by Silas Kern of Kansas City, and we need protection before his men find us." Coleman's expression shifted from suspicion to interest. "Silas Kern. Now that's a name I've heard before. Close that door and start talking." For the next hour, they laid out everything. Clara's evidence, Hope's persecution, the false charges the men who'd chased them from the hotel. Coleman listened without interrupting, his weathered face growing grimmer with each revelation. When they finished, he sat back in his chair. "This is a hell of a thing you're bringing me." "Can you help us?" Hope asked. "Can I?" "Yes." "Will I?" "That depends." Coleman leaned forward. "Silas Kern is connected in ways you can't imagine. I open an investigation, he'll fight back with every resource he has. That means all 3 of you will be targets until this is resolved, maybe longer. You ready for that?" "We've been targets since this started," Frank said. "Rather be targets moving forward than waiting for Kern to pick us off one by one." Coleman nodded slowly. "All right then. I'll wire the federal prosecutor in Kansas City, a man named Aldridge. He's straight, or as straight as anyone can be in that nest of corruption. But it'll take time to build a case strong enough to arrest Kern." "How much time?" Clara asked. "Weeks, maybe months." Coleman saw their faces fall. "I know that's not what you want to hear, but rushing this gets you all killed and Kern walks free. We do this right, or we don't do it at all. And in the meantime," Hope said quietly, "in the meantime, you go back to Wyoming and live your lives. I'll keep this evidence secure. When Aldridge is ready, he'll send for you to testify." Frank felt Hope sag with relief beside him. "So it's over. We can go home." "Not over," Coleman corrected. "But you bought yourselves time. Real time. This time. Not borrowed." As they left the marshal's office, the sun was setting over Cheyenne. They walked to the depot in exhausted silence, bought tickets for the next train to Wyoming, and collapsed onto a bench to wait. "We did it," Hope said finally. "We actually did it." "We did something," Frank agreed. "Don't know if it's enough yet." "It's enough for today." Hope leaned against him, her eyes closing. "That's all I can ask for." Clara sat across from them, Samuel's folder still clutched in her hands. "Thank you, both of you, for not running when it got dangerous." "We don't run," Frank said simply. "Not from things that matter." The train arrived an hour later. As they boarded, Frank noticed a man watching from across the platform. Not the one from before, but cut from the same cloth. Kern's reach was long, but so Frank was learning was justice. It just moved slower than evil did. "See him," Hope murmured. "I see him. We're not safe yet." "No, but we're not alone either." Frank nodded toward Clara, sleeping against the window. "We got allies now. Evidence. A federal marshal who believes us." "And each other," Hope added. "Most importantly, that." Frank agreed. The train rolled through the night, carrying them home to Wyoming. To their ranch, their cattle, their life. Whatever came next, they'd face it the way they'd faced everything so far. Together. And that, Frank was learning, made all the difference. They reached the ranch 3 days before Christmas. Snow had fallen while they were gone, covering everything in white silence. Frank helped Hope down from the wagon Tom Brennan had loaned them at the depot, both of them bone-tired from the journey. "Home," Hope said softly. Frank looked at the cabin, the barn, the cattle moving slowly in the corral. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. "Yeah, home." They were unloading their bags when Marshal Wade rode up, his face grim. Frank's hand went instinctively to his rifle. "Easy, Miller. I'm not here to arrest anyone." Wade dismounted slowly. "Got word from Kansas City yesterday. Federal prosecutor named Aldridge is opening an investigation into Silas Kern. Charges include embezzlement, fraud, and filing false police reports." Hope's knees nearly buckled. "The warrant against me?" "Suspended pending investigation. You're free, Mrs. Miller, for now." Wade's expression softened slightly. "Coleman and Cheyenne sent me the details. What you did took guts, both of you." "We did what we had to," Frank said. "Most people don't. Most people run or hide or let powerful men win because fighting costs too much." Wade extended his hand. "I misjudged you both. I'm sorry for that." Frank shook his hand firmly. After Wade rode off, Hope turned to Frank, tears streaming down her face. "It's over. It's really over." "Not quite." Frank pulled her close. "Aldridge still has to build his case. Kern still has to be arrested and tried. But we bought ourselves breathing room. That's worth something." "It's worth everything," Hope whispered against his chest. They spent that evening in quiet domesticity, Hope cooking while Frank tended the fire. It felt surreal after weeks of running and fear. Almost too peaceful. "You think he'll come?" Hope asked suddenly. Frank didn't need to ask who she meant. "Kern? Maybe. Men like him don't like losing. If he does, then we deal with it." Frank checked his rifle one more time. Together. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Frank was in the barn feeding cattle when he heard Hope scream. He grabbed his rifle and ran, boots slipping on ice. Hope stood in the cabin doorway staring at something nailed to the door, a piece of paper with words scrawled in dark ink. "You can run, you can hide, but you can't escape justice. I'm coming for what's mine. SK." Frank ripped it down, his blood running cold. "When did this get here?" "I don't know. It wasn't there when I went to fetch water." Hope's voice shook. "Frank, he's here. Or someone working for him is. Get inside, lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." Frank scanned the horizon, seeing nothing but snow and sky. "I'm going to check the property." "Don't leave me alone," Hope said quickly. Frank hesitated, then nodded. "All right, we go together. Get your pistol." They searched the barn, the corral, the tree line. Nothing. But Frank felt eyes on them the whole time, a prickling awareness that made his skin crawl. "Maybe he's just trying to scare us," Hope said. "It's working," Frank muttered. They were heading back to the cabin when riders appeared on the eastern ridge. 5 men moving slowly and deliberately. Frank pushed Hope behind him, rifle raised. "Frank Miller," one of the riders called out. "We need to talk." "Then talk from there," Frank shouted back. The rider dismounted and walked forward, hands visible. As he got closer, Frank recognized him. Deputy Tom Brennan. But not in his deputy's badge, just a man. "Tom, what's going on?" "Got something you need to hear. All of you need to hear." Tom gestured to the other riders. "These men are from the Ranchers Association. We had a meeting last night about Silas Kern." Frank lowered his rifle slightly. "What about him?" One of the other men rode forward. Frank recognized him as Earl Henderson, father of the boy Hope had saved from drowning. "Word came through telegraph yesterday. Kern's on his way to Wyoming, bringing hired guns with him. He means to take your wife back to Kansas City by force, legal or not." Hope's hand found Frank's arm gripping tight. "When?" Frank demanded. "Could be today, could be tomorrow, but he's coming." Henderson's face was set. "We're here to tell you that you're not facing him alone. Every man in this valley owes Hope Miller a debt. We aim to pay it. You'd stand against Kern's guns for us." Hope's voice was small, disbelieving. "Ma'am, you saved my boy's life. You healed Harker's mare. You helped Sarah Brennan's baby breathe again." Henderson's voice roughened. "You're one of us now, and we protect our own." Tom stepped closer. "I know I wasn't a friend when you needed one, Frank. I let pride and gossip cloud my judgment. I'm here to make that right. If Kern wants a fight, he'll get one." Frank felt something loosen in his chest. Something he hadn't known was holding him together. "Tom, Don't." Tom held up a hand. "Just let us help, the way we should have been helping all along." More riders appeared throughout the morning. Old Man Harker with two of his ranch hands, the Callahans from the general store, Pastor Reynolds, even Mrs. Dodd from the boarding house carrying her late husband's hunting rifle. By noon 23, people stood in Frank's yard armed and determined. "This is madness," Hope said, looking at all the faces. "You're risking everything for me." "No, ma'am," Sarah Brennan said quietly. "We're risking everything for what's right. There's a difference." They didn't have to wait long. Just after 2 o'clock, a line of riders crested the southern hill. 10 men, maybe more, all wearing dark coats and harder faces. At their center rode a man Frank had never seen but recognized instantly. Silas Kern. He was younger than Frank expected, perhaps 50, with silver at his temples and clothes too fine for rough country. He sat his horse like a man who'd never known doubt. The riders stopped 30 yards from the cabin. Kern surveyed the gathered crowd with cold amusement. "Well, quite the welcoming committee." His voice was smooth, educated, dangerous. "I'm looking for Hope Abbott, or Hope Miller, as she's apparently calling herself now." "She's my wife," Frank said, stepping forward. "And she's not going anywhere with you." "That's not your decision to make, Mr. Miller. I have a warrant for her arrest signed by a Kansas City judge. She's a thief and a fugitive." Kern pulled out a paper, waving it casually. "This little community rebellion you've organized won't change that." "Your warrant's suspended," Tom called out. "Federal prosecutor in Kansas City is investigating you for fraud and embezzlement, which makes your warrant worth about as much as spit." Kern's smile never wavered. "Investigations take time, months usually, years sometimes. I have documentation and the weight of law behind me right now. Do you really want to obstruct justice for a woman you barely know?" "We know her well enough," Harker said. "And we know you too. Reputation travels fast even this far west. You're a snake, Kern. Everyone here knows it." "Names don't frighten me, old man, and neither do farmers with rusty rifles." Kern's eyes found Hope standing beside Frank. "Hello, Hope. You've led me on quite a chase." "I ran from a tyrant," Hope said, her voice steady despite her fear. "Not from justice." "You ran from consequences, but they've caught up to you now." Kern gestured to his men. "I'll give you one chance. Come peacefully face trial, and I'll ensure Mr. Miller here isn't charged as an accomplice to your crimes. Refuse, and I'll burn this little fantasy you've built to the ground." "You'd murder all these people?" Hope demanded. "Murder, no. I'll simply have my men clear the obstruction to lawful arrest. If people get hurt, that's their choice for standing in the way." Frank felt rage building in his chest. "You touch her, you die." Brave words from a failed rancher with nothing to lose. Kern's smile was thin and cruel. "But I didn't come all this way to negotiate with peasants. Hope you have 10 seconds to walk forward. After that, my men start shooting, and I assure you they're much better with weapons than your little militia here." The crowd shifted, guns raising. Frank saw fear in some faces, determination in others. They'd stand, but they'd die. "Wait," Hope said. She started forward. Hope, no. Frank grabbed her arm. I won't let him kill everyone because of me. Her eyes were wet but fierce. I won't have that on my conscience. There's another way, a voice called out. Everyone turned. A rider approached from the north, moving fast. As he got closer, Frank recognized the federal marshal's badge. But it wasn't Wade. The man reined in beside Frank, breathing hard. Marshal Richard Coleman, from Cheyenne, and I have some information Mr. Kern might find interesting. Kern's composure cracked slightly. This is a local matter, Marshal. Federal jurisdiction doesn't. Actually, it does, especially when it involves interstate fraud and murder. Coleman pulled out his own papers. Silas Kern, I have a federal warrant for your arrest on charges of embezzlement fraud and conspiracy to commit murder. Your bank records have been subpoenaed. Your business partners are talking, and the judge who signed that warrant against Mrs. Miller, he's being investigated for accepting bribes. Your whole house of cards is collapsing. Silence fell over the yard. Kern's face went pale, then flushed with rage. You have nothing that will stand up in court. Nothing. I have Samuel Hendricks's documentation, 2 years of detailed records proving you stole from depositors, partners, and investors. I have testimony from Clara Hendricks about her husband's suspicious death. And I have bank receipts showing you withdrew the money yourself that you claimed Hope Abbott stole. Coleman's voice was hard. You're done, Kern. Kern's hand moved toward his coat. I don't think so. Don't? Tom warned, his gun trained on Kern. But Kern was already drawing. Frank shoved Hope aside and raised his rifle as chaos erupted. Gunfire cracked the cold air. Kern's men scattered, some firing back, some wheeling their horses to flee. Frank felt a bullet whistle past his ear. He fired once, twice, dropping one of Kern's men from his saddle. Beside him, Tom and Henderson were firing steadily. The crowd pressed forward, a wave of righteous anger. Kern spurred his horse forward, gun raised, heading straight for Hope. Frank threw himself in front of her rifle, empty, nothing but his body between her and the bullet. The shot rang out. But it wasn't Kern's gun. Old Man Harker stood with his rifle, smoking, his face grim. Kern swayed in his saddle, blood blooming across his shoulder. His gun fell from nerveless fingers. That's for every good person you destroyed, Harker said quietly. Coleman and Tom rushed forward, pulling Kern from his horse. His men were either fleeing or surrendering, outnumbered and outmatched. You can't do this, Kern gasped, clutching his bleeding shoulder. I'm a respected businessman. I have connections. You have nothing, Coleman said, snapping handcuffs on him. Except a cell waiting for you in Cheyenne. And after that, Kansas City, where you'll face trial for everything you've done. Hope stepped forward, looking down at the man who'd terrorized her for so long. He looked smaller now, pathetic, just a man who'd built power on fear and found it crumbling. I forgive you, Hope said quietly. Kern's head snapped up. What? I forgive you, for what you did to my father, for what you tried to do to me, because carrying hate would make me just like you. She turned to Frank. And I'm nothing like him. Frank pulled her close, his heart still hammering. No, you're nothing like him. Coleman organized the prisoners, deputizing several local men to help transport them to Cheyenne. As the crowd began to disperse, people stopped to shake Frank's hand, to hug Hope, to promise support. You'll need help rebuilding, Henderson said. Ranch took damage while you were gone. Some fences down, roof needs work. We'll have a work party out here after Christmas. I can't ask you to. You're not asking, we're offering. Henderson smiled. That's what neighbors do. By evening, only Tom remained. He stood by his horse, looking uncomfortable. I owe you both an apology, he said finally. A real one. I judged you when I should have been helping. I let pride get in the way of doing right. You came when it mattered, Frank said. That counts for something. Sarah told me if I didn't make things right with you folks, she'd never forgive me. Tom smiled slightly. She's meaner than she looks. She's a good woman, Hope said. You're lucky to have her. I know it. Tom mounted his horse. Merry Christmas, Frank. Hope, you've earned some peace. After he left, Frank and Hope stood together in the quiet, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. The cattle lowed softly in the barn. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. It's really over, Hope said. It is. What do we do now? Frank thought about the question. About the ranch that still needed work, the debt still owed the hard years ahead. But also about the community that had rallied around them, the future that stretched open and possible. We live, he said simply. We work. We build something worth having. Together, Hope added. Always together. Christmas Eve came cold and clear. The cabin glowed with candlelight, and the smell of pine filled the air. Hope had insisted on decorating despite everything hanging evergreen branches and ribbons she'd made from scraps. Frank stood at the window watching snow fall in lazy spirals. Behind him, Hope hummed as she worked on supper. You're quiet, she said. Just thinking. About 3 weeks ago, when I had a gun in my hand and nothing left to live for. He turned to face her. And how you knocked on that door and changed everything. Hope set down her spoon and crossed to him. You changed everything for me too. You gave me a home when I had nowhere to go. You fought for me when everyone said you shouldn't. You believed in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. Frank cupped her face in his rough hands. I love you, Hope Miller. Don't think I've said that yet, but I do. More than I knew I could love anything. Her eyes filled with tears. I love you too, from that first night when you let me in from the storm. When you could have turned me away, but chose grace instead. They kissed as snow fell outside, and fire crackled inside two broken people who'd found wholeness in each other. Come spring, we'll expand the herd, Frank said later as they sat by the fire. Henderson says he'll sell me 3 breeding cows at cost. And Tom mentioned the railroads looking to contract beef suppliers. If we work hard, we might actually make this ranch profitable. We will, Hope said with absolute certainty. Because we're not just building a ranch anymore. We're building a life. Christmas morning brought visitors. Harker arrived with a wagon full of lumber for repairs. The Callahans brought supplies. Sarah Brennan came with fresh bread and her baby, who gurgled happily in Hope's arms. By afternoon, the yard was full of people all celebrating together. Pastor Reynolds led them in prayer, thanking God for protection and provision. Someone brought a fiddle and music filled the air. Frank stood apart, watching his wife move through the crowd, touching shoulders, laughing, healing hearts just by being present. She caught his eye and smiled, and Frank felt a peace settle over him that he'd never known before. She's special, your wife, Henderson said, appearing beside him. Whole Valley's better for having her here. I know it. You're special too, Frank. Takes courage to accept help, to let people in. Most men would have fought alone and died proud. You chose different. She taught me that, Frank said. That strength isn't about standing alone. It's about knowing when to lean on others. Smart woman. The smartest. As sunset painted the snow orange and gold, Frank gathered everyone together. I want to say something, he called out, and the crowd quieted. 3 weeks ago, I was ready to give up. On this ranch, on myself, on everything. Then God sent me a woman through a blizzard, and she saved my life in ways I'm still understanding. He found Hope's eyes across the crowd. But she didn't just save me. She saved all of us. She reminded us what community means, what faith looks like, what courage really is. Hear, hear, someone called out. So I'm proposing we do something to mark this Christmas, something that'll remind us what happened here. Frank gestured to the cabin, the barn, the land. We're renaming this place, not Miller Ranch anymore. From now on, it's Hope's Haven. Cheers erupted. Hope's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Frank crossed to her and pulled her close. You gave me back my faith, he said quietly, just for her. Seemed only right to give you this. Frank, say yes, he whispered. Let me honor you the way you deserve. Yes, she breathed. Yes. Pastor Reynolds raised his hands. Then let's bless this land properly. Let's pray that Hope's Haven becomes a place of healing and refuge for all who need it. A place where the broken find wholeness and the weary find rest. As the prayer washed over them, Frank held his wife and looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the twilight sky. He thought about prayers unanswered and prayers answered in unexpected ways. About miracles that came not with thunder, but with quiet knocks on doors. About faith that survived even when belief died. Thank you, he whispered. Not sure if he was talking to Hope, or to God, or to both. For what? Hope murmured against his chest. For not giving up on me. For walking through that storm. For showing me that love is stronger than fear, and hope is stronger than despair. She looked up at him, her blue eyes reflecting firelight. We showed each other, Frank. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked. The party continued late into the night, but eventually people drifted home, leaving Frank and Hope alone in their cabin. They banked the fire and stood together at the window, watching the last wagon disappear into darkness. What are you thinking? Hope asked. That a month ago I wanted to die, and now I've got everything worth living for. That's a lot to gain in 1 month. Yeah, Frank kissed the top of her head. But I reckon we've got years ahead to make good use of it. Years, Hope agreed. And I plan to spend every single one of them right here. With you. Building our life. Helping our neighbors. Making this haven live up to its name. Sounds like a good plan. The best plan. They stood like that as snow continued to fall, covering the world in white silence. Inside warmth, outside cold. But together, they had everything they needed. Frank Miller had learned something in the weeks since Hope knocked on his door. He'd learned that faith wasn't about never doubting. It was about choosing to believe anyway. About opening doors when storms raged outside. About letting broken people in and discovering they could help you heal too. He'd learned that love wasn't what he'd always thought. It wasn't just passion or romance or grand gestures. It was showing up. It was fighting together. It was choosing each other every day, even when things got hard. Most importantly, he'd learned that miracles weren't always obvious. Sometimes they came disguised as mail-order brides with stubbornness and healing hands. Sometimes they looked like communities rallying around strangers. Sometimes they felt like finding hope in hopeless places. I love you, Frank said again, because it bore repeating. I love you too, Hope replied. Now and always. Outside, the sign over the gate creaked gently in the wind. Hope's Haven. Established Christmas 1887. A testament to faith restored love found, and two souls who refused to quit when quitting was the easier path. And in that small cabin on the Wyoming plains, surrounded by snow and stars and the promise of tomorrow, Frank and Hope Miller began their forever. Not because life would be easy. It wouldn't be. Not because challenges were over. They weren't. But because they'd proven something essential, that when two people stand together, when faith meets courage and hope meets determination, even the darkest winters eventually give way to spring. And that was worth everything.